Yeah, so like, I mean, like one of the things about like kiting that I really love is like you're like down on earth and you have this thing attached to a string and it's like way up there in the sky, and I just want to like get it higher and higher and higher, and yeah, it just makes me like warm and fuzzy inside, and you know, until it starts crashing down. And I used to live in the suburbs, so it'd be like, you know, the thing starts coming down and it's gonna like fucking land in your neighbor Jones' backyard that's like 6 backyards away from yours, and you're like, oh, it's like fine when you're a kid, but you know, when you're a grown-ass man looking for your kite, it's kind of funny.
It's a little different when you have to go chase it down and hop a fence, knock on a few doors, tracking it.
Can I get into your backyard, please? There's like string hanging all over the neighborhood. And then I feel like the funniest thing is like I get it, and you know, like I'm like back in the field and I got all this string and I'm like spooling it back up, and at the end, you know, the practical thing to do would be like, all right, I'm not going to deal with that again, but I'm usually like, well, I got this thing like charged back up again and there's wind and it's like woo, and so, you know, rinse and repeat basically. But
yeah, as long as there's not a little puncture hole in it or nothing.
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's get this party started, man.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us on Break the Cipher. I'm your host, Mike Grady.
Yo, I'm Emerson Kovacs.
Kicking it with you live.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be released live, so we're not ready for that yet.
Take 2.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, you know, before we get going, I just want to take a minute to ask you guys to subscribe, ask you to follow, like us, find us on Instagram and Facebook at Break the Cipher. And then YouTube is at Break the Cipher 420. That's where you can watch us. So depending on whether you like to listen in the car or you want to like, you know, see what we're up to with your eyeballs, you can find us. It does help us out a lot, and we really do appreciate it. We are also on X or Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays. Eventually, I think we will completely transition to X.
Yeah, that's the goal, or Elon's goal.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize he was just doing the letter X. I thought it was EX for a while, like ex-girlfriend, like X-Twitter.
Yeah, that could work too. Yeah, I think X comes from his original startup, and he wanted to bring that back.
Oh, really? What was his original startup?
X was the early version of PayPal.
Really?
Yeah, so it was X.com, and it was like, you know, old web browser, but one of the first that would facilitate transactions digitally.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I knew that he like had something to do with PayPal. Was it just like the .com that he owned, or did he set up like the infrastructure?
It was like X, and it was like a website, it was an infrastructure, and it was a card. I think it was like an actual card, but then it got, you know, funding and other people joined and it switched to PayPal, and then he jumped ship with his billions of dollars he got out of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we got a good show for you guys today. We have been perusing the marijuana news headlines, and there's a bunch of them. I wonder if you guys are reading them, but we picked a couple today to talk about and echo because they seem really interesting. Definitely a lot of things going on there in the world. And, you know, one of the places that we get these news headlines is marijuanamoment.net. I find that they do a pretty good job. There's some other ones out there like MJ Biz Daily, and I think Cannabis Culture is another one. But yeah, you know, so we'll go around and we will, you know, do our best to find articles that are interesting, that need some repeating or need some laughs or whatever. And so let's dive in. I'm going to turn my phone back off here real quick because it's going off. I didn't tell people that our live phone lines were down today, so
they're calling in.
They're trying to get on and
yeah. Well, eventually we'll be able to call in and have a little segment with that too. That would be pretty rad.
Yeah, we got to start our 30-day free trial, I think it's like Riverside or something.
Yeah.
I think you can do that. I don't know. Let us know, Riverside. We'd love to hear from you. We're looking for deals. And we'll get you your very own free coffee mug from Break the Cipher if you do that. So
limited edition. Yeah. It's a limited run.
All right. So let's see. First article I found that I was like, this is kind of neat. The federal agency grants $8.4 million to hemp company to produce sustainable cannabis-based alternatives for building car parts. So they're like, it grants $8.4 million to a hemp company to produce sustainable cannabis-based alternatives for car parts.
Well, I think it's building and car parts.
Okay. So federal agency, $8.4 million to hemp company to produce sustainable cannabis-based alternatives for building and car parts. Mm-hmm. So when I first saw this headline, dude, what did you think of when you first saw it?
I thought of, honestly, like 3D printed houses. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Not really, no.
Yeah, kind of crazy. It's like a big crane. If you think of a small scale 3D printer, right, that, makes all sorts of little trinkets and toys and what have you. They just made a big one that I've seen. And so I was like, well, maybe they're just like got all this hemp byproduct that they're just like mixing into concrete. I don't know.
I do know that you can do hemp concrete. There was a company out here, I think it was before they tore our the what do they call it? It was the coal mining factory that was in between Norwood and Nuclear Natarita. Oh. We had a huge coal plant, a huge coal industry out here where we are, which just got kind of shut down, which has been really difficult for people around here who worked in the coal industry. It's going to be very difficult for people powering their electric cars. I think that coal thing is going to be a thing even with the electric cars. So food for thought. But back on this thing, so you thought about 3D printed houses.
Kinda, yeah. That's where my head went. I was like, I wonder how they're doing that.
Yeah. I actually thought about that scene from Cheech and Chong. Have you seen that movie in a while?
I've seen. It's been a while. Which scene are you talking about?
So they're like smuggling a ton of grass, and they like every part of the car is like put together with like marijuana stalks, like the fender and the front air intake. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Like they're like spraying liquid marijuana for the paint.
Yeah,
that's the first thing that came to mind. But yeah.
That's a throwback. I forgot. That's crazy, man. That's a good call out, to be honest.
Yeah. But yeah, apparently it's this startup company, Hemptecture, like architecture, but Hemptecture. They received the grant from the DOE's office, manufacturing and energy supplies chains. The agency's Oak Ridge National Laboratory said in a post Monday. So it's one of 14 companies that were awarded collectively $428 million. And so that is kind of neat because, ever since this started, I mean, like we've all seen the memes and we've seen the things where it's like, you can produce X amount of paper per year with hemp, but it would take, I don't know, 20 to 30 years worth of growing trees to get the same amount of paper.
Right.
And so there's a ton of things you can do with hemp. You can make fuel out of it. You can make concrete. You can smoke it. I've tried that before. It's really good. Doesn't get you stoned, but it's kind of nice. I used to take like CBD flowers, which have no THC in them, and I'd like grind that up to roll into a joint, and I would just sprinkle like a little bit of THC on there, and like I could like walk around baller like I was just like tearing it down like I was Snoop Dogg or somebody. And so that's pretty cool. It's good to see that that's like coming from, a federal agency and stuff. And they're starting to look at hemp for its multiple uses that range from medical to concrete and everywhere in between. Right. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, I saw a ton of articles about, oddly, like other substances in cannabis, which I just kind of, in our last episode with Story Time, I was just kind of talking about this. I wonder if they're following us. Oh. Yeah, because I really touched on all these things. Like I was like talking about, how, if I'm thinking about going to the bar, sometimes I'll like, smoke a little bit of weed. Yep. And it's a trick I play on my brain. Right? Because I kind of know, but I'll be like, I'll think about it. I'll smoke a little weed before I go out. And then, like, almost immediately, I'm, like, looking for my sweatpants.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm not going out. I'm going to do laundry and smoke some more weed. And maybe I'm going to watch Harold and the Purple Crayon. And this is going to be a good night. But, yeah, this article, cannabis smoking is outpacing cigarettes. That came out today, November 15th. Is that today?
It is.
Hot dog.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty cool. Like I had a hard time with cigarettes. I don't know if you knew that about me, but I used to like chain smoke. I feel like 2010 to at least 16. And before that, I probably was not all perfect. I remember when I smoked my first Newport in 7th grade.
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That still gets you high.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. You were ripping a Newport.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah, I think my friend stole it from his mom. I just remember spinning like, damn, these cigarettes are crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good sign. I definitely like seeing that. The marijuana... The next article is marijuana is tied to lower consumption of alcohol, opiates, and other drugs in this new study that was revealed. And you can find these articles on Marijuana Moment. Super interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a big shift happening nowadays too, where like, I don't know, my folks, when I was growing up, at all the barbecue pictures and the family photo albums, everyone is just smoking. It was just kind of the thing that everyone did. But nowadays, definitely less people smoking cigarettes. But I think, alternatives have picked up, like the Zins, as far as those nicotine pouches, and obviously just hitting the tobacco nicotine vaporizers. But it is reassuring to see that there's a connection that these articles are finding, and the research is showing that, marijuana use is really decreasing other substance use as well. So it's a positive in that regard.
How do you react to it? Like if you've had like 2 or 3 beers and then you smoke? I have a reaction. I'm just curious what yours is.
Tobacco or
no, like if you've had 2 or 3 beers and then you like smoke weed?
Yeah, mellow out.
Mellow out?
Yeah, I just mellow out. I'm like kind of not hankering for that 3rd, 4th beer or whatever. I'm just like easing into it, like, oh, this is nice. Like I think I might finish off this bowl in a little bit.
Dude, I get a little sick feeling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if I've had like 2 or 3 beers or a cocktail or something like that, if I have a little buzz going on with alcohol, and it's really easy for me to talk myself into smoking at this point because my inhibitions are to the wind.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, I'll smoke a little weed. Because, a friend's like, you want to smoke a little weed? I'm like, I'll smoke a little weed. And then I smoke it. And then if you know me personally, a lot of times, like, you'll be like, dude, you look kind of white. Like right afterwards.
Oh,
and like you've been with me, I'm like, I can't smoke yet. I'm like pretty good.
Yeah, you have some restraint.
Yeah. Like people will offer it to me, I'll be like, oh no, I just I had too much of this or that. I can't be smoking weed at the moment. So but hit me up later, once like some of the alcohol kind of is like filtered out of my system. And so, yeah, I get a little sick. So I understand this article quite well. And I've known about the opiate side of it for years, actually, where like marijuana has been helping people that are addicted to opiates. And that's just through working at the shop. So, I mean, ever since 2010, when we started taking, appointments with doctors at the shop to like help people schedule their medical marijuana appointments and stuff, like people would come in and they would have some sort of ailment, right? Like they have a back problem, they have a neck problem, they broke their arm, some sort of chronic disease that they have. And one thing that I heard all the time, literally all the time, is I need to get off the pain pills. And so even early on, like people were making the switch from pain pills to cannabis as early as 2010. And I hope they stuck with it because I've had to take, I had several surgeries over the last 3 years. And I had, at different points, I had to take like Vicodin, which I was really grateful for, because I was really in a lot of pain. But it would be for like 2 or 3 week stints, and I could actually feel the opiate monkey. I'm pretty good at identifying monkeys. Yeah. Ooh. You gotta watch out for the monkeys. You gotta like know when they're peeking their heads up, because I remember like at the end of week 3, I'd be like watching the clock a little bit more, like, is it time for my pill? And then I would tell the doctor, I'm like, nah, I think it's time. I gotta switch gears here. But I was grateful for it. But yeah, people have been using cannabis to help them get off opiates for a little bit, whether you're, dealing with, an ailment of some sort, or maybe you just somehow got addicted to heroin or something at some point. I think cannabis is a viable method, a viable way to like maybe get out of it. I think that I've never done heroin or anything like that, but I know that for people who I know, some of those people are people I love. It is like one of the most difficult things ever. And I think to a certain extent, it does like require tricking your brain a little bit and like, okay, I'm just going to have a little sip of this and feel good. And it's kind of the same thing I do with going out to the bar, because sometimes I'm like, I should probably stay home because I got all this shit to do. And so I'm like, I'll just try a little weed first and then see how it goes. And so really cool that there's an actual new study that came out. And so check that article out. It's at Marijuana Moment. And let's see. Moving on. This one, good Lord. This one I've been ready to talk about. I have been ready to talk about because I've been a little fired up about this and some things that are attached to this, because I know people who this has like really, really affected their lives. And I think it comes from a lack of understanding of, cannabis culture from the point of the customer, right? Yeah. But this article, it said that the headline reads, "There's no linear relationship of blood THC to driving," study finds, calling into question many state marijuana impaired driving laws. Now, I want to start out by saying I don't think you should smoke weed and drive. Okay? I personally do not do that because it's actually a waste of weed to me. And I know for some people I know out there that's not the case, but for me it is. I'm like hyper aware. I'm checking my mirrors. I'm making sure my speed's good. I'm like too good of a driver almost, right? To the point where it makes me anxious.
You're no longer in relaxed, like sit back and cruise. You're like,
yeah,
checking the mirrors.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck was that? Who's? And so I'm not really into it, but I feel like growing up in high school, college and stuff, I mean, didn't we all have a friend named like Teddy or Tom or somebody that like had a van and there was like a fucking bong attached to the center console? Did you have a friend like that?
I mean, it wasn't attached to the center console, but we definitely had the hot box mobile.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like kind of put out there to us, and like in like movies and stuff.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know, all the way back to like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You know, like, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're being real, like, it's like even Scooby-Doo, there's some theories about them in that mystery mobile.
Oh yeah, dude. There's stuff going down in that.
They come out of it and there's like ghosts and shit everywhere. Who the hell knows what they were doing? And so here's like the real thing about it for me is number one, if you're a customer at a cannabis shop in Colorado, at least, I don't know all the driving laws everywhere. But if you like buy weed, okay, it has like a seal on it, right? And you leave the store, you go home, or maybe you go to a buddy's house to like watch the game or whatever it is you were going to do. All right. And you go and you're like, oh, I just got this weed at a store. All right. So you open the container, the seal is broken. Okay. We broke the seal. Right. And then you're at your buddy's house watching the game. Broncos are winning. That's super cool. Night was awesome. You guys smoked a bowl somewhere along the way, probably, you know, at the beginning of the game, and then probably again around halftime. Then you ate some wings and hung out for a little bit. And anyways, now you're like, okay, cool. I feel good to drive. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, yeah. And so you get your weed, you put it in your bag, and you drive yourself home. And a lot of times people are like sober after an hour or two after smoking weed. And that's the truth. And so, then you get in your car, you put it in your bag, and you are driving home. You get pulled over for some reason. And the officer is like, hey, it smells like weed in here. And it's probably because you like broke some weed up to smoke it in the bowl, right? And the officer's like, all right, well, listen, you're going to come to the station with me. Or no, you're going to come to the hospital with me, and we're going to do a blood draw. And if you refuse to do that, then it's just assumed that you are driving impaired, right? Like a DUI, like if you refuse the field sobriety or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you refuse to go to the hospital to have your blood drawn because maybe your fingers smell like weed or something, then you get a DWAI, I believe. And furthermore, if your container is found, that container that you opened up at your buddy's house to smoke weed,
that you purchased legally.
Yeah. If that container is found, they're treating that the same as the open container law in Colorado. So it's like the same charge as if you had a fifth of vodka open in your cup holder.
Oh my goodness.
Which is astronomically different.
Yeah, of course.
That's nuts.
That's crazy.
Like
yeah.
just to me as a driver, if somebody had a fifth of vodka in their cup holder versus like an open container of an eighth of weed that they smoked a little bit on, it's a totally different thing.
That's crazy. I did not realize that with the container aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Well, aren't you glad we talked?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I don't tend to have things like out visible or whatever, but I mean, yeah, if you're packing up and you're headed back home from a buddy's house after a game, you know, you're not worried about whatever. You're just like trying to get home.
Exactly. And the other part about it is if you buy a quarter of weed, you're going to take, even if you don't go to a buddy's house, you go home, you open the weed, you smoke the weed, you stay at home, you don't drive, you go to sleep. The next day, somebody says, hey, you want to come to a barbecue? You bring your container, which has a broken seal on it now, because you want to bring your container over to smoke with your buddies, which people have been doing for decades with weed.
Yeah.
Before it was legal, we were traveling around with like sandwich bags.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sandwich bag, the little film container.
Yeah.
Cartridge.
Yeah. We've been doing that for years. And so it's like the idea that is that people, like, you buy the weed, you take it home, you smoke it, you leave it there, and that's that. Like, that's not how weed works. Weed's a very communal thing.
Definitely.
And so, not to get too far off topic, but I thought this article was really interesting because they have based impairment on nanograms of THC in your bloodstream, which means if an officer pulls you over, they smell weed in the car, whether it is weed that you ground up with your fingers or If it smells like you just burned a roach, that's kind of your fault. So make sure you don't smell like you just burned a roach in your car.
Yeah.
Take a little bit of precaution. And, but anyways, if the officer just assumes like, hey, you need to come to the hospital with me. We're going to draw your blood and see if the nanograms are higher than they're quote unquote supposed to be. You either go to the hospital, have your blood drawn, or you say no, and they give you a DUI anyways because you said no, just like with alcohol. And so the article kind of sheds light on the fact that there's not really any quantified evidence showing that, that nanogram of THC in your bloodstream affects your driving. It doesn't affect your ability to respond, or it doesn't lower your awareness. I'm not saying that cannabis, it doesn't do that at all when you're driving. I'm just saying it's not attached to the nanograms of THC in your bloodstream, which means this whole blood test thing doesn't matter, right? And it's like, are we making rules and kind of screwing with people's lives before we really know the scientific evidence behind these things? Because I know several people who have gotten screwed over, maybe just for having the open container side of it in their car. Like it was like an open container of weed, which means the seal was broke. And they got charged with an open container, the same as alcohol, and so that's like pretty severe.
Oh man, that does not seem fair or just in any way, shape, or form. And like looking into the article a little bit, it looks like back in 2022, this Senator John Hickenlooper, Democrat out of Colorado, sent a letter to the Department of Transportation, DOT, and I want to say it's NHTSA, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. Going on a limb there. But anyway, that senator sent out this letter to these, Department of Transportation and agency and such, seeking an update on the status of a federal report into the testing for THC impaired drivers. And the department, those DOJ or DOT department, was required to complete the report under a large-scale infrastructure bill that President Joe Biden signed. But it missed that deadline, and so now it's still unclear when we're going to kind of get an update on that. So it just seems weird because there's obviously a push even from these senators to kind of update how this testing is done related to THC and drivers that may or may not be impaired. And there's not really much like update and progress on that front, which is kind of backwards. Like you'd think that there would be if President Biden is signing a bill and there's a deadline that was established and now that was not met.
Yeah. I mean, and especially because it is kind of ruining people's lives.
Yeah.
And what we're finding out is that the nanograms actually don't have anything to do with the impairment. And so whether you're a person that got pulled over, said, come to the hospital with us, we're taking your blood, and you went, and the nanograms were at like 8 or something, and they were like, you get a DWAI. Or you were one of those people that said, no, I refuse to go in and let y'all take my blood because I didn't do anything wrong, which is fine because like we have rights and stuff. But those people also got DWAIs just for saying no. And now what we're reading is like the test is what? Is that obsolete? It's not really a good way of assessing it.
Correct.
So, wow, that one blew my hair back. Definitely check that article out. Look up, THC blood, nanograms, and driving. You can find it on Marijuana Moment, but I'm sure there's other stuff out there. And they should get an actual study together. I wouldn't mind participating. I'm a lightweight when it comes to smoking weed. And so let's get me really stoned and get to the bottom of this. Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Like, it will only take me like one good bong rip. That's all we'll have to spend on me in weed. Okay?
Resourceful.
And I can tell you right now, one good bong rip would have me in a place where I should not drive personally. All right? And let's just see what the results yield. That's all.
Field study.
Okay, moving along. Oh, this one really gets me. This has gotten me for years.
The feathers are ruffled on
Good
this.
Lord. Outdated marijuana packaging rules make it impossible for cannabis industry to be environmentally sustainable. Study says, well, I could have told you that 10, 15 years ago. It is absolutely nuts how they make us bend over backwards with these containers and packages and resealables and blah, blah, blah. And I get it. All right. I really do. We don't want kids to be able to get into the cannabis. Okay. But there was one point we had to have it in a childproof container in a bag that was resealable on a childproof level all the time. And with all this crazy stuff, and these are like heavy duty plastic bags, thick millimeter, like all these requirements. Then I go to the liquor store. Do you know that not one of those things is childproof? It's not childproof on a resealable level, and it looks like apple juice.
Oh, yeah. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're telling me, like, if your kid knows how to roll a joint, it is somehow the dispensary's fault? Like, because of their packaging? Blows me away. And it's put us into this position where we have to use all these plastics and pop top child-proof containers that are like regulated and have all this paperwork behind it. And so we can't a lot of cannabis industry, we're kind of like, and not necessarily environmentalists, but we like give a shit about the environment and, taking care of it. Like, I mean, there's so much plastic waste. It's incredible. And it's all to keep kids out, which I get. I totally get that. Yeah. But it's like, well, your kid, you just like put it in a place in your house where your kids can't get it. That is how you fix the problem. And if your 5-year-old knows how to roll a joint up and smoke it, you got to take a look at that. Like, I'm telling you, like... But yeah, it is ass backwards. And I think the responsibility needs to be on parents, okay? Not to leave their shit laying around, right? We can't be put into this position with packaging where like it is now becoming like one of the most wasteful things. I have seen some like hard paper stock packaging coming out, very expensive.
Right.
One of my buddies opened a company. You guys look this up if you want to. Here's a free shout out to you guys. It's called Sana Packaging, and they make cannabis packaging out of like recycled ocean plastics.
Oh, wow.
Pretty dope.
Yeah.
It was like his like college thesis.
Yeah.
Leaving college, he like came up with this packaging company for cannabis industry that gets ocean plastics and turns it into these packages. So at that rate, it's like, okay, at least we're like figuring out one problem with another problem. And so that's cool. Yeah, Santa Packaging. Check them out. But I like the paper stock ones too. They're just very expensive and not that easy for businesses like mine to just purchase, because you have to purchase in such high quantities, like pallets and stuff like that. So great article. Definitely a problem in the marijuana industry, and we definitely needed to change. I want to have like a mug club at our shop where you could like come in with your mason jar that has like a cool design on it, maybe like a Break the Cipher design.
Yeah,
one of our guys. Yeah, and you just come in. It means you're like part of the club. You're part of the club.
Yeah.
And then we could just like refill it, and then we'll put your labels on there that tells you all the things and stuff like that. But no, you can't do that. Isn't that nuts?
That's ridiculous. That's a great idea. That's like a cool, sustainable way to like almost with beer and growlers, you know?
Yeah. You can do it with beer.
Right. Yeah. The beer. Yeah. And it's still like already opened and could be easily opened by anyone.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have any labels put on your beer either that like establish when and where you bought it. And
that whole growler could be moonshine for all they care.
Yeah.
All they know.
Do whatever you want with beer. Make beer right now. Okay, Mario, right along. Well, thank you guys for hanging with us. I know this has probably been extremely boring.
No.
What?
No.
You're too kind.
They're headlines.
You're too
This is
kind.
headline news.
Headline news. Oh, the next one. Okay, we got Jared Polis. Let's see. Jared Polis. I think the one I was bringing up about Jared Polis was actually different than the one I have on my screen, but I remember, so I'll just move past that one. But yeah, Jared, before the election happened, everyone was talking about Florida and Amendment 3 for like their legalization initiative, which they almost passed. Congratulations, Florida, because speaking to many of you over the years at the shop and Telluride, you are a group of people who have said to me that it'll never happen in Florida. Same with you, Texas. You guys also have said that to me. Hi, it's Grady from Alpine Wellness. Nice to see you. I know. But yes, you guys have been saying that for years. It'll never happen in Texas. It'll never happen in Florida. And Florida just like lost by a small margin.
Yeah. I mean, they had over 50%, but for some reason, to pass,
amendments.
it needed 60% or more. So
I think it's like amendments to like state constitutions need 60%.
Okay.
I think Colorado is that way as well. And so that was close. I mean, that's like not that. I mean, so many people were like, it'll never happen there.
Yeah.
Over the years. And same with Texas. Texas has an initiative going on. And so I hope all those people are like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I told that guy Grady so many times, this will never happen.
There's hope.
Yeah. And some of you bet me money. So just remember,
That
all right,
bet's still on.
you can find me. I'm still in the Telluride region. And I hope to see you this winter, for sure. But yeah, I was going to bring up this article. It was like Jared Polis, Governor Polis, giving some advice to Florida. I think the governor in Florida, the DeSantis.
Yes,
I think so. DeSantis.
Yes, it is.
And he was going over like some of the benefits of cannabis, and it was about how much tax revenue they can make off the cannabis. And then some of the ways that tax revenue could be spent. And it made me feel a couple things. Number one, I agree, but I also think the state of Colorado is taking way too much money from the cannabis industry in the form of taxes. They're also taking too much money in the form of fees, licensing fees. Our licensing fees are now $4,500 every 2 years per license that we own. And I do not think it's that way for like liquor stores. And we were supposed to be regulating cannabis like alcohol this whole time, since the beginning of the initiative. I think it was like 2011, 12, 13. You got guys like Brian Vicente, Christian Cederberg. Those are advocates of marijuana legalization. They're a big part of why it is legal today. But the whole initiative in Colorado was regulate cannabis like alcohol. That's not what is happening here. We're taxed like 7 times the amount of alcohol, and we have to compete with stores on out the door pricing, because if it's a $30 eighth, it's a $30 eighth, it's a $30 eighth. It can't be, if it's a $30 plus tax eighth, you're talking a $40 eighth. And so to the customer, it's like, well, if you're selling $40 eighths, then I'm going to the place selling $30 eighths. And so, the government's taking way too much money in taxes. And the other thing I don't like is they are not using it in the ways that they should be, especially in the ways I saw outlined in that article. In fact, in our local community, our school district has tried to tap into some of the money that comes from cannabis, and they can't do it because they can't afford the $10 million bond that's required to even apply for those funds. And that's because we are in a lower middle class community. Our school district is underserved, underfunded. It should be qualifying for the BEST grant, but it can't because the voters can't fit the bill. And so that's kind of discouraging. It's like I've been sending out all this extra money. I mean, the only thing I could see that would be awesome here about sending the government all of this extra money over all of these years is that, like, I actually see something locally happen, like our kids get their school improved because it needs to be improved. But the hurdles that are created to even access this money is crazy. And it's like, 2023, $274 million was collected in just marijuana tax alone. And so while I'm reading this article about the governor and he's all like, oh yeah, the tax revenue, number one, your cannabis industry is dying because of how much you are taking in tax revenue. And number two, you're not using it in the ways that you said that you were, and it's like, we don't really need that much policing. Like there's like, we're going to use this money to regulate you guys, and then we're going to use it for like infrastructure and schools. And it's like, I'm not seeing that. And so, here's a distress signal. The Colorado cannabis industry is kind of falling apart. Right? Yeah. It's not just because tourism. It's because all these businesses are going out of business because they can't afford to pay the tax bill and their payroll. And that is a motherfucking problem. Big time. So I feel like what we should do is go back in time, and we should regulate marijuana like alcohol. So I think that means around here, the tax on marijuana would be 2.9% to the state, 1% to the county. And then in Telluride area, I think it's 5.9 to the town, 6.4 to Norwood. Boom, how am I doing? That's what we should pay in taxes, for the record. Yeah. All right. And if Ron DeSantis wants to talk to me about the reality of this situation, you give me a call, Ron. Alrighty, so we are moving right along. Okay. Well, what do you think about this one?
I think it's quite interesting. I think it's very relevant considering today is Friday, November 15th, fight night.
Booyah!
Yeah.
Is that the right song? No, it might be football.
Yeah.
But it feels like a fight song.
It is a fight song. Oh, if it gets the people pumped.
I'm pumped.
It's motivational.
I'm pumped.
It's provocative. It gets the people going. Yeah. Headline reads, Nevada officials adopt rule to stop penalizing boxers and MMA fighters over marijuana.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
I didn't realize they were doing that.
Yeah, I didn't, realize that either, but I know it's been an issue in a variety of sports, and the punishment or the penalty or the fines have kind of changed or evolved over the years, but the issue remains the same, is that people are getting penalized and fined for use of marijuana, athletes.
Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, I don't see why you would fine somebody over that.
Right.
Other than trying to take their money, they're fining them. What are they fining? Are they fining them money?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I say about that? There ain't no such thing as halfway crooks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're just going to like, oh, we caught you smoking weed, we're going to take your money? That doesn't sound fair.
No, that's criminal.
No. I know it's like such a performance-enhancing thing, cannabis, and for some people it is, but it's not like steroid use. No. So, yeah, that's surprising. Yeah. That's surprising that was even a thing. I think they should let boxers, football players, baseball players, golfers, you should be able to smoke weed. It's like kind of good for you. That's my opinion. You know,
it says here that 2 in 3 Americans feel that Olympic athletes should be able to use marijuana without facing penalties.
What do you think about that?
I think that they should. I think, honestly, Michael Phelps was a pioneer in that regard. You know, a lot of people had a stigma about it. Oh, if you smoke, you're lazy, you know, what have you. You can't become a successful athlete. Well, he's the most decorated Olympian of all time.
I know. Like, who's talking?
Right.
Yeah, like, who's saying that? Who's writing that article?
Someone that clearly needs to have a joint.
Right? Somebody who's clearly, like, not in a pool where Michael Phelps could chase them after smoking a weed. After smoking weed, it was like, yeah, well, I'm not in the pool with Michael Phelps. He'll never be able to catch me for talking so much nonsense. But it's so stupid when we like get involved with other people's lives over this, because it's like you have like a misunderstanding, maybe because you never used it, or you just and that's fine if you never used it. I don't care if you used it. I just care if you judge people and then try and find them and take their money and disqualify them. Like what? That just sounds like trying to cut people down. Like he is the most decorated Olympic athlete. Like as long as he's not using steroids.
Right.
Like, because that creates like an unfair playing field amongst athletes. Like, I don't see what the problem is.
No. I mean,
yeah,
good for him, honestly. Because, like I said, pioneer. A lot of people didn't really associate being an athlete, let alone a Olympic athlete, let alone the most decorated Olympic athlete, with marijuana. But he's been pretty open about it, and I think it has paved a way, not only in Olympic sports, but all sorts of different sports, to relax, to not get so caught up in fining people for what they do off season, or when it's not game time, or when they're not competing. Are people getting fined for drinking or going out to the bars?
No, not at all. And I think one of the biggest issues with the athletes, and I think that I became a little more conscious of this when it wasn't the last Olympics. It was the one before that, during COVID, where Simone Biles. You remember that? She got case. She got a case of the jitters, or whatever she called it, and so she didn't compete. And at first, I was like, "Come on, Simone! This is what you do for a living. All these things." And then, you come to find that, there is just so much mental pressure on these athletes. And she's doing tricks that could cost her life or her ability to walk. And who am I to be like, oh, you can do it, pull it together. This is what you do for a living. And it's that's where I think weed could be helpful, when it comes to stress and anxiety and nerves, because they're just dealing with cameras and people that want to talk to them, and they are required to perform at a level that is higher than they've ever performed every time they perform.
Right. The bar keeps getting moved up.
Yeah. If I was Simone Biles, I would have to smoke weed.
Yeah.
I would. And I feel like I'd get back to my room, my hotel room, I'd sit down and I'd be like, oh, thank God. And I'd be like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Oh, so good. Absolutely 100% know that about myself. I would need that moment.
Yeah.
All right. So we got this last thing. I thought this was really cool. I think it's an article about New Mexico, but it relates to something else I heard about New York. I think New York is the first place that allows cannabis use in off-duty police officers and off-duty firefighters. And I say 2 thumbs up for that, right?
Yeah.
That's important to me. That you guys can wind down in a way outside of a whiskey bottle is so important to me. These are the people who protect the public, serve the public, save you from buildings. We're going to tell them they can't smoke weed, but they could have whiskey. That's fucking ridiculous. But this article is actually about New Mexico, and they are working on a plan to stop punishing off-duty marijuana use by their government workers. And round of applause. Absolutely. Maybe the DMV is going to be a little bit friendlier, and there ain't no problem with that. There ain't no problem with that. Why is this DMV so funny? Oh, it's because we're in New Mexico and they allow them to smoke on their weekends. Great. I don't care. What? The DMV worker can't have a gummy on a Saturday? It's none of my business. You guys know, as well as I do, that it's not something that somebody should even get punished for in the first place. And if you think that they should, then you should just, on one weekend coming up here, go buy a 10 milligram gummy. Okay? I want you to cut it in half. Okay? I only eat 5 milligrams at a time. because I'm sensitive. And so I always tell people gummies and edibles and stuff is it's like a sleep number bed. Yeah, you got to find your number.
Yeah.
All right, so start low, eat a 5 milligram gummy, okay? Enjoy your Saturday, be friendly with your family, have a great time doing your chores, get back to Monday and tell me that, like, you couldn't function on Monday. Like, you should be punished by some other adult that told you couldn't have that, like, very nice experience. And that same adult wouldn't punish you for polishing off a bottle of booze.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why everybody's grumpy. And so that's the last one, Emerson.
Yeah, that was a good full spread of news that we covered. Some good headlines, some good things. There's a lot happening, you know, every week, especially now that elections are over. Things have been decided, but there's still a lot of decisions now to be made and changes that are coming. So we're looking forward to seeing what that brings and reporting it back to you.
Absolutely. And this has been it's been a lot of fun. You know, we want you guys to know that we got nothing but love for you. You know, we're sitting here because we want to, and we appreciate all the support that we have been getting. It has been overwhelming how many people are hopping on board after just a few episodes. And what I believe and what I think Emerson believes at this point is that that's because, like, you guys like us. So, you know, and we like you too.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Yeah, it goes both ways. We really appreciate you. Check out all of our channels. We got the YouTube up and running. We released our mission statement. Please check that out if you haven't. You can always go back in time in our episodes to, you know, see what's been going on, because there's a little bit of a variance in them. There's not always going to be the same thing. It's not always news. It's not always regulations. Sometimes it's going to be stories with me and Emerson, or maybe it's just going to be Emerson one day because I'm out of town.
We'll have a fireside chat.
Yep. But we are working on setting up a little studio in Telluride at the cannabis store. I'm working on that over the next couple weeks. And that way we can do some interviews with some of you who are traveling to Telluride. Maybe you're from, you know, Chicago or New York or LA. We're going to have a way for you to sign up to be on the podcast at the store, and that's going to be super fun. So many times over the years at the shop, I've had so many amazing conversations, and the one thing I wished was like, I wish we recorded that. It was like beautiful. And so anyways, we'll let you guys go. Like us, follow us. We're here for you. We're here for this. We're going to keep it coming at you. This is Break the Cipher.
Till next time.
Peace.
Peace.